You're always one step ahead, trying to show you're different, giving too much love, replying instantly. And still, you're forgotten? Maybe because of it. I'm Naira Elowin. And what if your relentless giving is what's killing the desire? Today you'll understand why certain well-intentioned behaviors sabotage attraction, and you'll learn how to use silence, pause, and selective presence to be remembered with truth. The mistake of always anticipating to prove your worth. You anticipate. You reply before being asked. You're always ready, even when you weren't invited. All of it in the name of a value you believe you're showing. But here's a hard truth. Anticipating everything doesn't reveal strength. It reveals fear, fear of being forgotten, the terror of not being enough, anxiety disguised as availability. And when you step into the role of emotional customer service, what you're giving isn't love, it's urgency. The other person feels it. They might not understand it rationally, but they sense the overload as a burden. Constant anticipation is unconsciously perceived as a lack of self-worth, because someone who has value waits to be seen. Someone who gives without being asked teaches others to forget. You may think you're being mature, caring, present, but really, your anxious attachment brain has learned that love must be constantly proven. The truth? Love doesn't need proof. It needs space. Remember that time you offered help before he even asked? Or guessed the problem before he said a word? It seems like care, but it's control in disguise, control born from fear. And that fear pushes him away. Have you ever typed, "I'm here if you need me," before he even said, "Hello"? Volunteered to fix a silence that wasn't yours? Tried to be the solution before he realized there was even a problem? Stop. Stop compensating for his absence with your overwhelming presence. Stop fighting rejection by giving even more. Because in the realm of desire, what is rare is remembered. What is too constant becomes invisible. He doesn't miss you because you never stepped out of the way. This isn't about turning your back. It's about learning the emotional waiting point. That place where you breathe before giving, where you observe before rushing in to save, where you ask yourself, does he deserve this part of me, or has he just gotten used to it? That's where real magnetism is born. Magnetic presence isn't about doing more. It's about doing less with intention. It's about knowing the right time to show up, and more importantly, the right time to step away. Because a sun that never sets loses its sunset, and care that's always there is never celebrated. You don't have to be perfect weather all the time. You need to be the pause he fears losing. False autonomy that hides neediness. You stopped texting first, stopped asking where he is, who he's with, what he feels. You tell yourself you're at peace, but you still fall asleep wondering if he noticed your silence. Here's the problem. Your absence is still presence, disguised as indifference. It's the trap. A false autonomy, a kind of independence that seems strong but is fragile, because it isn't born from freedom, it's born from fear. Fear of seeming needy, fear of rejection, fear of showing you still care. You've gotten good at holding back, smiling on the outside and silencing your insides, posting like you're unbothered, hoping he sees, disappearing just to trigger longing, faking a detachment that doesn't exist. That's not strength, that's performance. It's pride masking emptiness. You think you're in control, but you're in self-defense. Real self-sufficiency doesn't need a stage. It doesn't need to be announced or noticed. It simply is, and that's why it's attractive. But when that strength is just a facade, you sabotage yourself because your energy says one thing and your heart says another. That incoherence is felt. He might not understand it, but he senses it. He feels something's off. and he pulls away. Not out of cruelty, but because he doesn't know where to land. Have you ever held your phone and thought, if I text, he'll think I'm chasing him? Held back just to maintain an image? Said whatever? When inside, everything was screaming that it did matter? That's the silence that traps you. Stop trying to seem untouchable. You don't have to erase what you feel to be respected. You don't have to pretend you need no one to be strong. Coldness isn't mystery. It's a wall. And walls eventually become prisons. Desire doesn't come from artificial distance. It comes from authenticity. It's when you show up without begging, feel without melting, walk away without drama. Want to be magnetic? Start with conscious emotional silence. Not the kind that tries to trigger a reaction, but the kind born from someone who already knows. She has nothing to prove. It's the silence that doesn't explain itself, doesn't seek applause, doesn't try to show how fine you are. It just is. And if he doesn't notice, let him not. The most powerful presence is the one that never begs for attention. It knows its worth doesn't depend on someone else's response. And those who have to look free are still imprisoned. Are you cold? Or just freezing your heart to fit into a role that's costing you too much? Love doesn't fall for masks. It seeks what's real, and real has warmth, has presence, has pause, but never, ever has pretense. Unconditional emotional availability, you thought loving more would make him want you more. That if you stayed available, present, generous, he'd see your worth. But what did he see? Someone always there, always ready, always giving before he even asked. And desire doesn't grow where there's no space. Even the most well-intentioned affection can smother. Because the human brain doesn't respond to what's constant the same way it responds to what's rare. Complete certainty reduces desire, not out of cruelty, but out of biology. This is pure neuroscience. The dopamine system thrives on anticipation, on maybe, on what if. When something is guaranteed, the brain labels it neutral. No emotion, no spark, no exceptional value. You became the certainty he never asked for, the affection he never had to earn, the presence he never had to reach for. And so he stopped looking. Not because you weren't enough, but because you gave everything. Before he ever felt hunger. You've been there, haven't you? Offering emotional support with nothing in return, sending long messages and getting dry replies, making plans alone, giving your all, while he only showed up halfway. And you know what hurts most? The feeling that the more you give, the less he wants. That's the paradox of emotional scarcity. Value lies in balance, not in excess. Love isn't a favor. Presence isn't an obligation. And those who give too much teach others to expect less and less. That's why the tactical disappearance calendar can change everything. It's not about vanishing out of pride. It's about disappearing to recover your value. Creating small absences, real, conscious, strategic, so your presence becomes felt again. Because those who never disappear are never sought after. You don't need to play the game. You just need to stop playing it alone. Think of it like a feast, the most delicious in the world, but served every day at the same time with no surprise. Eventually, no one tastes it anymore because the brain gets used to it. The soul gets bored. The body stops craving. You became that feast, served before the hunger. Want to be remembered? Learn to disappear, to create longing, to not respond right away, to not give it all up front. You're not being mean. You're being fair with your energy. And if he doesn't miss you, let him not, because worse than not being wanted is being remembered only for your unconditional availability. You are not an emotional resource on demand. You are a rare presence, and anyone who wants you should learn how to find you with intention. 4. Emotional reactivity as a form of attachment. The notification pops up and your heart races. You don't think, you reply. Maybe with an emoji, maybe with a "hope you're well" message that doesn't reflect anything you're actually feeling. You're not replying to communicate. You're replying to not disappear. That's the blind spot. You think you're keeping the connection alive, but really, you're keeping the cycle alive. Reactivity isn't just a habit. It's an emotional addiction, a way to constantly confirm that you still matter. But the more you react, the less impact you have, the less he hears you, because your voice becomes an automatic echo, too predictable to create presence. Have you noticed how some of your messages get a dry lull? Or no reply at all? Felt like your responses were happening on his timing instead of your genuine desire to speak? Ever sent a "hey" just to feel like you still exist? That's not communication. That's emotional survival, and the root goes deeper. Maybe into childhood, where you learned that if you weren't quick enough, you'd be left behind. Maybe in past relationships, where silence meant punishment, where whoever stayed quiet won. And you learned to chase, to explain, to anticipate. But there's a different kind of woman, one who doesn't chase, not because she doesn't feel, but because she knows her value doesn't live in the response. It lives in the presence she builds in silence. You can be that woman. But first, you'll need to quit the addiction to instant replies, because every time you answer without reflection, you hand over control of your emotional state. You step out of yourself to meet someone else's rhythm, and once again, you abandon yourself. Try the pause, but not just any pause. Try what I call the pause with purpose. When that desperate urge to reply hits, stop. Put your hand on your chest. Feel the urgency. Say to yourself, "This is fear, not love." Wait 90 seconds. Breathe. Return. To yourself. In that pause, you reclaim your ground. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational, wise, strategic part of your brain, needs time to come online. It doesn't show up when fear is screaming, but it does show up. And when it does, you respond differently. Or maybe you don't respond at all. And in that act, you save yourself. You're not being indifferent. You're being conscious. You're stepping out of emotional begging and into emotional sovereignty. Those who master their reactivity don't become cold. They become magnetic. Because what truly attracts isn't constant availability. It's the quiet self-control of someone who doesn't need to be seen every minute to know she matters. So ask yourself, do you have urgency or presence? Do you fear being forgotten or have the courage to be remembered by your absence? Because the one who replies to everything says very little, but the one who knows how to wait, even with a racing heart, speaks volumes without saying a word. Sometimes your best reply is no reply at all, not as a game, but as a gesture of value, as a choice to stop feeding a dynamic that drains you, as a powerful statement that says, "I exist, even in silence." Don't confuse speed with relevance or immediacy with connection. The woman you're becoming knows how to wait, because she's already understood. The one who always runs is never followed. Trying to be the exception for emotionally unavailable men, you believed you could be different. That with you, he would change. That the love you carried would be enough to heal his absence, turn his coldness into warmth, and convince a distant heart to stay. But let me say this, with all the pain and all the clarity. No one changes because you're special. He only changes if he wants to. The idea of being the exception is one of the cruelest traps of unrequited love, because it starts as hope and ends as self-erasure. You convince yourself that you just need more patience, more presence, more giving. And in that effort, you begin to disappear. You give, you shape yourself, you go quiet, You ignore clear signs, swallow your body's own alerts, trample over your dignity, all in the name of a maybe. A maybe that never arrives. You've done this, haven't you? Excused his absences saying, he just needs time. Rationalized his rudeness as, he just doesn't know how to express himself. Waited for a change that deep down you knew was never coming. And the more you tried to be the one, the more replaceable you became. Because what made you unique wasn't how much you could tolerate, it was how well you knew when to stop. There's a concept called the emotional Pygmalion effect. When you believe so deeply in someone's potential, you start treating them as if they already are what you hope for, even if they've never shown it. The problem? That's projected love, not lived love. You begin loving an idea, not a person. And little by little, you turn into a woman who's trying to renovate someone else's ruins, while your own emotional structure is collapsing. But you're not a renovation project. You are a ready-made home, and if he won't enter, he doesn't want to live there. And those who just hang around but never step in need to find a closed door someday. Let me tell you a real story. A woman spent years trying to be the exception. She endured disappearing acts, cold excuses, empty promises. She gave it everything, cried in secret, smiled during short dates, dressed up for him, waited for him. One day, she woke up and realized there was nothing left to give. Not because she'd turned cold, but because she was done being generosity. Without return, she didn't beg, didn't ask him to stay. She simply stood up and never looked back. Today, he texts, sends empty messages, says he misses her, but she already knows. Someone who truly misses you doesn't need to lose you to remember. You don't need to be the exception. You need to be exceptional to yourself. Those who want you, show it. Those who can, choose. Those who feel, commit. The rest is just an attempt to rewrite a script that already has an ending. The real question isn't, will he change for me? It's, how many more times will you betray yourself to play a role that was never yours? You're not a restoration project. You are a whole woman, and those who can't see that don't deserve even your outline. Over-explaining to Wei. Justify the absence of reciprocity. You say he had a tough childhood, that he doesn't know how to love because he never saw real love, that he has trauma, walls, fears. And so, you justify everything, the disappearing, the disregard, the coldness. You justify just to stay. But every time you explain away someone else's behavior, you start erasing your own. This is one of the quietest addictions of women who love too much, protecting someone else from the consequences of their absence. You become the lawyer of someone who didn't choose you. You cover their lack of affection with empathy. Explain their absence with compassion. You try to understand what, deep down, has already been clearly said. He doesn't reciprocate. You rationalize everything. And in that process, you dissolve. Your mind tries to find logic where your heart already found pain. You build theories, hypotheses, arguments, and forget to feel, because feeling hurts. Because feeling forces you to face what you don't want to admit. He doesn't want the same thing. Period. This is the cycle of emotional rationalization. When you use intelligence as anesthetic, you become an expert at interpreting silences, justifying coldness, giving beautiful names to abandonment. But the name is simple: disinterest. Neuroscience calls this cognitive dissonance. When what you're living contradicts what you believe, your brain tries to adjust reality to avoid breaking your expectations. So you create a story where he's not absent, he's just complex. You've done this, haven't you? Told your friend, he's just confused. He's scared to open up. He just needs space, while he simply wasn't showing up. Enough. Stop interpreting his silence. Start listening to your own. Not every question deserves an answer. Not every absence needs a backstory. Some things make no sense because they're not supposed to. Accepting that is your first step toward freedom. Want a healing exercise? Grab a pen and paper. Write down every question you still have about him. All the doubts, the unfinished sentences, the lingering whys. Now, read them out loud and say, "I accept never knowing." That's the ritual of liberation because you don't need another excuse. You need a line in the sand. The truth is, when someone truly chooses you, there's nothing to figure out. It's clear. It's felt. It's present. And when someone doesn't choose you, that's clear too. You're not being noble by justifying him. You're self-sabotaging. So ask yourself, do you really want to know the reason he's absent? Or are you just trying to postpone the moment where you finally show up for yourself? Stop using your intelligence to explain what's already been shown. Use it to leave the cycle, to silence the questions that go nowhere, to say, even without understanding, I choose to move on, because it's not your job to understand everything. It's your responsibility to stop disappearing, while trying to comprehend someone who never makes themselves clear. 7. Saying what you deserve without acting like you do. You say you deserve respect, reciprocity, gentle love, consistent presence. But when he ignores you, you go quiet. When he disappears, you wait. When he comes back like nothing happened, you answer. Saying what you deserve means nothing. If your actions still bend for the bare minimum, there's a massive gap between the language of worth and the behavior of worth. And it's in that gap that many women lose themselves. You learn about boundaries. You read about self-worth. You share quotes on self-love. But in practice, you accept crumbs, forgive repeated absences, ignore obvious signs. You stay, hoping that if you say it enough, he'll finally get it. But he doesn't hear words. He reads actions. The human brain has a phenomenon called the reverse emotional halo effect. When what you say doesn't match what you do, everything you communicate loses power. You become incoherent, untrustworthy, not to others, but to yourself. You say you're a woman of value, but stay available for someone who never fully chose you. You've seen it happen, haven't you? Wrote a post about self-worth and answered a 2 a.m. call from someone who disappears for weeks. Said, "I'm done with this," and came back at his first message? It's not lack of intelligence. It's the habit of trying to be understood instead of being firm. That's why strategic silence can be more powerful than 1,000 words. Because it doesn't beg, doesn't explain, doesn't justify. It simply stands its ground. It's not about silence out of pride. It's silence that says any word without action behind it is just noise. You need to flip the equation. Fewer needy words, more actions in abundance. Want to feel worthy? Act like your dignity is non-negotiable. Want to be treated with truth? Start by stopping the lies you tell yourself, that what you're living is enough. Do you want to be recognized? Or do you finally recognize yourself? Because every time you have to repeat what you deserve, something inside you still doesn't believe it, and action is the only thing that heals that belief. Stop talking about what you want. Start walking away from what doesn't deliver. You don't need to convince anyone. You just need to be consistent with what you say. And if he disappears the moment you stop explaining yourself? Good, because anyone who walks away from a consistent woman was never ready to stay. Using intensity to justify losing yourself in the other. You love hard. You give it your all. You don't know how to feel halfway. And for a long time, you thought that was noble. That being intense meant being real. That diving deep into someone meant courage. But when your intensity turns into fusion, you stop being a woman and become an extension. There's nothing wrong with feeling deeply. The problem is when what you feel erases who you are. Psychology calls this diluted identity. when the line between you and the other becomes so blurry that you can't tell what's yours and what's just a reflection of them. You've lived this, changed your tastes to match his, adjusted your schedule, your clothes, your voice, distanced yourself from friends, stopped doing what you loved, all because he took up every space, and you thought loving meant giving yourself up to fit inside someone else. But let me remind you, fusion isn't depth, it's confusion. True connection doesn't require you to disappear. It happens when two whole people meet, not when one dissolves to keep the other. Here's the shift that has to happen. You don't need to be present all the time to be felt. Deep presence isn't measured in quantity, but in quality. And quality requires boundaries. That's why building your emotional map is essential. Pause and ask yourself, where do I end and where does the other begin? If you don't know, you're lost in your own relationship, and no one can find you where you don't know how to be found. You say you're intense, but maybe you're just afraid of being forgotten. Maybe your giving is just a desperate attempt to be indispensable. Stop using intensity as a license to disappear. Because every time you merge, you teach him that your identity is flexible, and desire doesn't grow where there's no firmness. You've seen this play out. The more you give, the more he pulls away, the more you're there, the more he treats you like part of the furniture, not because you're not enough, but because you vanished. And when you vanish, you stop being seen. You don't have to become the ocean to be deep. You just need to remember, you have feet, you have shape, you have edges, and you can love without losing yourself. The kind of intensity that attracts is the one that beats within boundaries, that touches without invading, that offers without begging, that gives and knows how to return home, and home is where you remain yourself, even when you love. If someone can only stay with you when you stop being whole, that's not love. That's consumption, and you are not something to be consumed. You are someone to be chosen, with boundaries, with presence, with truth. Someone who truly loves you doesn't want to merge. They want to see you shine, without dimming the lights around you. You just spent this entire message hearing what you need to stop doing. But now, I just want to ask one thing. If today were the last day he could reach you, would you leave the door cracked open? Or would you lock it with the key of the woman who finally understood her worth? If that question is echoing inside, you subscribe. Here we don't wait anymore. We choose. Tell me in the comments, what part of you will he never find again?